tone and meaning intact, but enhancing it with more detail and depth. The frost-bitten streets of Paris whispered beneath Lucien's boots, each step echoing with the weight of unfinished vengeance as he marched through the icy fog that clung to the city like a secret. The winter air bit at his cheeks, but he hardly noticed. His mind was aflame, his grip tight around the crumpled edge of a letter that had haunted him for years. His father's final words, "She took everything," echoed in his skull, louder than the clatter of carriages or the distant cry of church bells. That sentence had shaped his every move since the funeral, hardening him, hollowing him, sharpening him into a blade forged in grief. Now, standing before the towering iron gates of the Rousseau estate, their intricate gold filigree glinting mockingly in the moonlight, Lucien felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest, hesitation. The chateau loomed ahead, a palace of decadence built on ashes, hers and his. Beyond its arched windows, light flickered like fire across opulent walls, and within, Élodie Rousseau reigned over her evening salon like a monarch without mercy. Her laugh, rich and merciless, cut through the night like a blade through silk. Élodie, his father's nemesis, his own obsession, stood beneath the chandelier, her auburn hair blazing as if kissed by flame, every curl dancing in candlelight. She was everything he had envisioned during sleepless nights and rage-filled mornings, beautiful beyond reason, dangerous beyond measure, and as distant as the stars above Versailles. He slipped past the guards with a practiced ease, his fury disguised in velvet tones and polished manners. When he found her at last, he bowed low, masking his hatred behind the curve of a smile. From the garden outside, he had stolen a single blood-red rose, still dusted with frost, and he held it out to her with the grace of a suitor and the cunning of a snake. "A token," he said smoothly, voice like fine wine laced with poison, "for the most dangerous woman in all of France." Her green eyes met his, sharp and unblinking, narrowing not in fear but recognition. She accepted the rose without flinching, her slender fingers brushing the thorns with deliberate elegance, and in that moment he wondered, truly wondered, if such a woman bled at all. Ready for the next part whenever you are. Absolutely. Here's your second excerpt, expanded with richer language and deeper emotional and sensory detail, while staying true to the original mood and narrative. Weeks slipped past like melting wax, their edges blurred in a fever dream of velvet nights and sharpened glances. What began as a mission rooted in vengeance evolved into an intricate, dangerous dance. Lucien became a fixture in her world, always just close enough to observe, never quite close enough to touch what he truly sought. He haunted her salons like a specter cloaked in charm, sipping wine with revolutionaries and laughing with aristocrats, all the while committing her every word, every flick of her wrist, every tremble of her voice to memory. He watched her closely, studied how her tone would soften into something reverent, almost wistful, whenever she spoke of her late husband, the man whose grave still cast a long shadow over her throne. But when the Duc de Laval entered, a man draped in silks and secrets, with poison in his smile in the king's ear, her voice changed. It sharpened like a blade honed on grief, clipped and cold, masking something deeper. Fear, perhaps, or loathing. Lucien took it all in, every nuance, every fracture in her gilded armor. He told himself it was strategy, preparation. But the truth was more dangerous. On a night thick with jasmine and risk, beneath the marble arches of a moonlit colonnade, Élodie stepped into his path. The garden's silence was broken only by the rustling of ivy and the quiet thunder of his heart. She was wrapped in midnight blue, her skin aglow under silver starlight, and her presence felt like the moment before a storm. Beautiful, electric, and fatal. "You look at me like a man who's starving," she said, her voice low, almost mocking, but the tremor beneath it betrayed something else. She stepped closer, the heady scent of her perfume, violets and danger curling around him. Her breath, warm against the line of his jaw, carried her next words like a warning. But hunger can be fatal here. He should have walked away. He should have remembered why he came, the years of fury, the promise he'd whispered over his father's grave. Instead, he kissed her. It was not tender. It was raw and reckless, a collision of need and fury, of teeth grazing lips and breath stolen between gasps. It was a kiss that tasted like betrayal and felt like drowning. In that charged moment, revenge and desire battled for dominance, neither willing to yield. She was the first to pull back, but only just. Her lips were parted, her breath uneven, her composure undone. "This is a mistake," she murmured, voice fraying at the edges. And yet, her hands remained tangled in the lapels of his coat, as if she too was suspended in that fragile, forbidden gravity neither of them could escape. Feel free to send the next section when you're ready. This is getting intense. Absolutely. Here's your next section, richly expanded while preserving the emotional intensity and tone of the original. Winter deepened, relentless and sharp as a blade. Snow blanketed the countryside like a shroud, muting the world in white silence. At a royal hunt deep in the Ardennes, fate twisted its hand. A blizzard swept in with little warning, cutting off the noble party from the safety of the main estate. In the chaos, Lucien and Elodie found themselves isolated, their carriage diverted, their guards lost to the storm. They sought refuge in a half-forgotten hunting lodge, its wooden bones groaning beneath the weight of snow, its hearth barely alive with a flickering orange glow. Inside, the cold crept in through stone and timber, curling around their limbs like a phantom. The fire hissed weakly, and Elodie, her gown soaked through with melted snow, trembled in the fading light. Her once imperious poise was gone, stripped away by the elements and the silence between them. What remained was raw, real, and fragile. She sat on the worn bearskin rug before the fire, her arms wrapped around herself, the glow of the flames casting shadows across her face. And then, in a voice so quiet it could have been mistaken for the wind, she began to speak. "I loved him," she said, her gaze fixed on the fire. "Your father, once, a long time ago." Lucien froze, the weight of her confession striking him like a falling tree in the forest of his convictions. His breath caught in his throat. "We were reckless," she went on, voice thickening with memory. "Naive. I thought love could survive anything. But I was 17, and the world is never kind to foolish girls." Her hands trembled in her lap, and tears tracked silently down her cheeks, catching in the firelight like broken stars. "He was ruined because of me. The Duke found out. Of course he did. He made an example of your father, not out of jealousy, but as a warning, a leash around my neck." She turned to Lucien, her eyes wet and hollow. "I tried to save him. I did. But what could I do? I was just a girl with no name of my own, no allies, no power. And now," her voice cracked, "now I'm a widow with no soul." Silence fell, heavy and cold, until the only sound was the soft crackle of the dying fire. Lucien sat beside her, his chest tight with a pain that had no name. The truth had shattered his rage, scattering the pieces of his hatred like glass across a frozen lake. In its place was something heavier, sadder. He reached for her hand, and her sleeve slipped back, revealing a thin white scar along the delicate skin of her wrist. It was old, but it whispered of pain that still lived in her bones. A relic, he now realized, of her late husband's cruelty, not the shadowed aristocrat history remembered, but the man whose violence had left marks no title could disguise. Lucien traced the line gently, reverently, as if trying to smooth the past with his fingertips. "No more," he said, voice low but firm. "No more suffering. Not from him. Not from the duck. Not from anyone." He Absolutely. Here's your next installment, expanded with heightened tension, atmosphere, and emotional stakes, while staying loyal to your original story's rhythm and themes. But Versailles was no palace of peace. It was a gilded beast, and it fed not on food or gold, but on secrets, betrayal, and the slow erosion of promises whispered in the dark. Lucien should have known better than to trust stillness in a place so alive with whispers. The court had eyes everywhere, and rumors traveled faster than horses. When he stumbled upon the letters, delicate sheets of ivory parchment bound with Elodie's personal seal but addressed to a Spanish diplomat, something inside him fractured. The words were affectionate, strategic, intimate. They spoke of future alliances, of leverage, of trust between lovers. They made a mockery of everything she'd whispered to him beneath candlelight and snow. He confronted her that very night, his boots loud against the marble, his voice louder still. "You played me," he snarled, the letters trembling in his clenched fist. "Was it all part of the performance? My father, the tears, the fire in that lodge? Was I just another pawn in your little game? Elodie's face went pale, then flushed with rage. She stepped forward and slapped him, the sound sharp as a pistol crack. Her eyes blazed, wild and wounded. You think I wanted this? She spat, voice trembling with fury. The Duke forced me to write them. He's known about us for weeks, about your father, about everything. He cornered me with threats, with blackmail. I thought if I gave him something, he'd stop. But he never does. He never stops. The room rang with silence after her words, a silence filled with the kind of truth that suffocates. Lucienne left her standing there, her hands still burning from the slap. That night, he sent the challenge. The duel was set for dawn. The garden outside the Petit Trianon was cloaked in frost and shadow, the breath of the duelists rising in the cold morning air like ghosts. Pistols gleamed beneath the sky, slow bleeding into pale gold. The Duck arrived draped in confidence and silk, as if death could not touch men like him. Lucienne stood opposite, calm, coiled, a man with nothing left to lose. The signal was given. A shot cracked the morning. The Duke staggered, not from Lucien's bullet, which had missed its mark, but from something far more intimate. From behind him, Elodie appeared, her skirts darkened with frost and motion. Her dagger, small and wicked, protruded from the base of the Duck's spine. Blood bloomed across his brocade coat like a crimson rose, staining the snow at his feet. His eyes widened in disbelief before he collapsed, graceless and final. Elodie stood over him, panting, her chest rising and falling beneath her cloak, her hands painted in red. I told you, she said, her voice low and fierce. I protect what's mine. Lucien looked at her, at the woman who had once been his enemy, his obsession, his salvation, and realized